been its dark moments where I've thought about giving up and, going and seeing all my friends having a good time during uni while I was stuck at work. Couldn't go snowboarding whenever I wanted to or anything like that. But looking back on it now, my wife and I, we own our own home in Christchurch. We're in a good financial position. It's no student loans. I can't argue with that. And it's definitely. I don't think it will be my be all and end all. I think there's more to life than there's plenty of careers to try out. So might try my hand at a few other ones. But for the meantime, it's great.
Well,
Fantastic.
I've got a sister in building services actually who's an engineer, and she's a member of the National Organisation of Women in Construction, and I know through that I've met lots of women in the trades, and so that is something that I think there is so many opportunities, like you say, Amos. It would be fantastic to see young women and young men taking up the opportunities that are across construction.
Amos, so good to have you on the panel. You're finishing the show. Better let you get back to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Wallace. Appreciate the call.
Awesome. That's Amos, qualified Christchurch electrician there, following up on yesterday's a degree or a trade. And that is us. Thank you so much, both. Thanks for the book recommendations, both of you. Phil O'Reilly, Joe McCarroll. I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow, Friday, Power Ballad Friday, 3:45. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint is next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei, the South Island's taking hits from every direction. The Gore District is under a state of emergency. They're sandbagging and pumping out floodwater. Gumboots on will go there live. And in Queenstown, news, a boil water notice could be in place for months, has left businesses steaming. Oranga Tamariki admits it hired gang associates to work in its secure youth facilities because it didn't screen people properly. The man in charge of turning it around, former Police Commissioner Mike Bush, joins us. A dust up over gang violence in Coromandel. And on the lighter side of life, we meet Hazel and Spruce, who'd love a ticket to ride on Christchurch buses. Stay tuned. You can watch us on Freeview Channel 50 or on the RNZ website.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Homes are being threatened by flooding in the Gore District, where a state of emergency has been declared. The stormwater and wastewater network has been overwhelmed in Gore and Matauda as a result of torrential rain. No one has been evacuated at this stage. NIWA says Gore recorded more than a month's worth of rain, 66 millimetres in less than 12 hours today. A Gore woman who doesn't want to be named is worried swollen rivers will continue to rise.
It came up really thick and fast this morning, but now that's stopped raining a little bit. It's holding its own, so it'll be worse later when the floodwaters come down, the rivers.
The Southland Regional Council has issued half a dozen flood warnings for rivers in the district. And in Invercargill and Bluff, people have been warned to stay off the roads because of significant surface flooding. In Queenstown, there's also surface flooding on State Highway 6. The Mayor of the South Island's Mackenzie District says it could be a long summer ahead as crews battle multiple scrub fires in the area. The Pukaki Downs fire south of Twizel is still burning over 165 hectares, although no longer spreading. A second fire has broken out this afternoon further north on Mount Gerald Station near Lake Tekapo. Fire and Emergency is predicting a big fire season ahead with El Niño conditions set to bring hot, dry and windy weather in the coming months. Mackenzie Mayor Anne Munro says the district is already under pressure.
Potentially is going to be a long summer ahead. These winds have been really unforgiving. The weather has been very dry, and so yes, it is a concern. But like all challenges, you take them as they show themselves.
Stronger growth numbers and a recession reassessment have Labour and National at odds over the state of our economy. Stats NZ says GDP rose 0.9% in the 3 months to June. It also revised its previous figures, meaning the economy didn't go into recession early this year. Jemima Houston reports.
Labour's finance spokesperson says the figures show the economy has rebounded and the books have been managed well. Grant Robertson says the numbers are stronger than that seen in Australia, Canada, the UK and the US. But National's finance spokesperson strongly rejects Labour's argument. Nicola Willis says the party has recklessly mismanaged the economy and Mr Robertson is out of touch with the public struggling with the cost of living. She says National's alternative fiscal plan will be released before October.
Oranga Tamariki says it's committed to addressing a culture that has stood in the way of complaints over staff conduct. 3 Oranga Tamariki staff are facing charges and 22 have been removed from residences after an incident management team was set up to receive grievances 3 months ago. Bill Hickman has more.
An external rapid review of Oranga Tamariki secure residences was begun after 6 staff were stood down over allegations of misconduct in June. 4 staff were linked to a video of young people being encouraged to fight, and 2 more were removed from residences after allegations of inappropriate sexual behaviour. Since then, the agency has received 46 complaints, with some dating back as far as 2015. Acting Chief Executive Phil Grady said on RNZ he found the allegations abhorrent and expected more charges would follow.
WorkSafe has confirmed it's looking at cutting between 100 and 120 jobs. RNZ reported yesterday the overhaul was expected to be announced today. The Public Service Association's Jeff Sissons says it's devastating.
It's a big hole, 120 jobs. It's a real devastating blow to our members because they do really important work.
WorkSafe says it's consulting staff about its proposals, which won't have any impacts on its frontline investigators and inspectors, whose numbers it aims to boost. And Wellington's Victoria University is axing 230 jobs and cutting 6 language and geoscience courses in an effort to save money. About a third of the jobs being disestablished are academic roles. 75 staff took voluntary redundancy, with an estimated 65 more redundancies expected after resignations and redeployment to 34 newly created jobs are taken into account. To sport now, and the Black Caps take on Bangladesh tonight in the opening one-day in Dhaka with an under-strength side that includes just 5 players who will play in next month's Cricket World Cup. Stand-in captain Lockie Ferguson says the 3-match ODI series against Bangladesh is good preparation for the world event.
There's certainly no series that we take lightly. This is going to be a very challenging one, and obviously we'll come up against these guys in the World Cup in subcontinent conditions. So it's a great opportunity for us to, I guess, sort of work out what kind of cricket we want to play in the subcontinent.
Auckland golfer Ryan Fox will tee up in the French Open near Paris tonight, hoping that he'll be there again in a year's time for what would be his 3rd Olympics. Hot off his BMW PGA Championship win last weekend, Fox is hoping to continue his strong form this week. The event is at the National Course, which will host the Olympic tournament in 2024.
To come to this venue in the Olympics will just be fantastic. I mean, I've been lucky enough to do it twice now in Rio and Tokyo, and hopefully nothing crazy happens before next year and I can come back here, and it'll be great knowing the golf course. I've played here a bunch of times. I've had a couple of good results here as well.
Fellow New Zealander Daniel Hillier is also in the French Open field. And the Australian supercars return to New Zealand has been locked in for April 19th to the 21st next year. The government's major event fund has invested $5 million over the next 3 years in the event at Taupo International Motorsport Park. Supercars left New Zealand after the closure of Pukekohe Park last year. Koinanga Pitupitsu Kōrero.
The claws come out over national crime rates.
In the last 48 hours, we've had drive-by shootings. We've had some of the worst gang and gun violence ever we've experienced in our country.
In a debate where no one is off limits.
We've got more policy announcements to come around justice. Look, the fact of the matter is...
When is that, Mark? Is that coming soon?
And the participants turn spicy.
The gangs have been attending gang hoods.
Winston, the microphone has an off button and I'm not scared to use it. Criminally Good. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Whanganui to Wellington, mainly fine. Cloud increasing in the west tomorrow with patchy drizzle from Horowhenua to Wellington. For the remainder of the North Island, fine, then becoming cloudy tonight with patchy drizzle developing. Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine today. Rain developing tomorrow afternoon with heavy falls. For Bulla, showers turning to heavy rain tomorrow afternoon. Westland and Fiordland, heavy rain easing in Fiordland this evening, and Westland late tomorrow. Thunderstorms possible today. For Canterbury, high cloud today with severe northwest gales about the high country. Rain developing in the south tonight, spreading north tomorrow with heavy falls and snow lowering to 100 metres. Otago and Southland, thundery rain easing to scattered showers in Southland this afternoon and Otago early tomorrow. Snow above 400 metres in Otago tomorrow. And for Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at about 20 past 5.
Kia ora rā e ho, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai, ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The South Island's battling it out on a number of fronts, extreme weather, fires and a parasitic gastro outbreak. More on that later. But first, the Gore District is under a state of emergency. Heavy, relentless rain set in early this morning and hasn't stopped causing surface flooding. The Gore and Mataura storm and wastewater systems have been overwhelmed. A number of roads are closed and residents are being asked to stay home if possible. Council staff have been pumping flood water and laying sandbags to protect properties. Meanwhile, Met Service has heavy rain, wind and snow warnings in place for the majority of the South Island. Joining us now from Southland Civil Emergency Management is Sonia Gherkin. Hi Sonia, what is the latest there?
Oh, hi Lisa, how are you? I'm actually from the Gore District Council. We've set up a ECC here in Gore, but we do actually work with Southland Emergency Management. So so the situation here right now is it's still raining, unfortunately.
And how much rain have you had?
So we estimate it's about 85 mils since this morning, which, as you've rightly said, has caused significant issues for our stormwater, wastewater networks. We've had a lot of surface flooding. A lot of homes have been threatened. So it's not so much, this isn't not so much about threat to people, but more threat to property.
Okay, so what's happening on that front? Have you basically got toilet waste going into people's homes?
No, I don't think we have. I'm pretty sure we haven't, but as you can expect, when the network is overwhelmed, it just can't cope with the volume of water that's been coming down and through it. We have had a fantastic response from the community, though, because we've been sandbagging since mid-morning. So we've had about 50 tonnes of sand has gone out. People have been calling in. Our teams here have been overwhelmed with the number of calls. And then we had to put a call out for volunteers to help us fill sandbags. We had 40 people turn up at our depot to help us out. So it's been a real community effort today around the town.
And has water got into any homes?
Look, not that I'm aware of. I couldn't say unequivocally that it hasn't. I think it's seeped into garages in some places. But the team's been doing a fabulous job of trying to get to where they're needed. Obviously, we've had to close, I think it's about 15 roads and streets around the urban areas that have had to be closed just because to stop cars going through it, and because we do have that issue in terms of if the car goes through, it causes that bow wave, which will then push water potentially into people's properties.
So, Sonia, what can people expect in the next few hours and obviously overnight?
I've just got, according to the Met Service, we can expect a bit more rain, another 10 to 15 mils, I think, on top of what we've already received. So I think everyone here is looking out the window and looking skywards, hopefully, hoping for it to clear very shortly. We're also having to keep a close eye as well on the Mataura River, because obviously significant rainfall in the headwaters there will have an impact downstream. And look, I just want to say it's not just us either. There's other parts of Southland as well that are experiencing similar issues to ours.
And so, Sonia, with the Mataura River, how do you expect, how much of a lag will there be on that? How long do you have to be really cautious of that?
Look, I'm sorry, I don't have that information. That's Environment Southland. They're the guys that look after that for us. They're currently doing modelling, I'm sure, and trying to work out if there's anything that we need to be aware of, and will keep us well appraised of the situation.
So, what's your message to residents right now?
The message right now is stay home, stay dry. If you do feel unsafe or threatened, then we have community emergency hubs. There's one in Gore at the Croydon Lodge, and there's one at the Mataura Community Centre. And I suppose just check on your neighbours. Make sure you're all okay out there.
Thanks for your time, Sonia. Best of luck. That is Sonia Gherkin, who is from the Gore District Council there. 12 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. If you're in that area and there's surface water, roads closed, let us know the latest. 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The news Queenstown may be boiling water for months has gone down like a cup of cold sick with businesses in the town. The Queenstown Council has been served with a compliance order for its 2-mile water treatment plant, which doesn't have the necessary barrier to stop cryptosporidium entering the water supply. The Mayor says getting that filter installed could take months, and in the meantime, the boil water notice must stay in place. It is a major blow for the tourist town right before the start of the school holidays, with businesses having to get creative to get by. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi are in Queenstown.
Gloomy clouds over Queenstown, and it was a gloomy assessment from the Mayor today about the town's water woes.
That's probably a worst case scenario, months. Yeah, I've got to be open with you.
Months people here might have to wait until they can drink the water running out of their taps, and potentially months of disruptions for businesses like here at Joe's Garage. They're sourcing water from Lake Hayes in 20-litre containers and hooking that up to their coffee machine, but they're going through it quickly.
Just for the coffee machine, we've gone through about 100 litres this morning. So it's quite a bit, so it's constantly back and forth trying to get that water because we can't keep up boiling that much, so we've got to get it from outside.
Co-owner Ryan Churchman says it's adding a lot of extra labour and cost to the business. They're also boiling water for food prep and hand washing each morning too. It's not something they can keep up for months on end.
No, not ideal. Yeah, ideally we'd like it sorted as soon as possible.
What the council needs fast is a UV filter to put into a treatment plant that serves the town. The Mayor, Glyn Lewis, has told the council he wants a timeframe by the end of next week on when that filter can be installed. And even then, it might not be the end of the issue.
UV will not eliminate the risk for a boil water notice. There are cases where the water turbidity or the clarity of the water will be too high, so UV will not actually be effective in those situations, so a boil water notice will have to come in.
The council's planning to bring water tankers in and has had offers of help from other councils. Owner of Billy's Espresso and Sandwiches, Bevan Higginson, has been filling up their coffee machine with bottled water.
Downtown sold out of water that night. It's lucky I know a few people in and around, and they were like, we've got a delivery first thing tomorrow morning to come in. So that's when we managed to get that.
He says the possibility of getting water from a tanker will be helpful, but has concerns around supply and convenience for businesses.
It can't be an expense to us because it's not our fault. Yeah, so as long as there's enough to go around, that's for sure.
He says the council's timeline for a fix is not good enough.
Shocked if it's going to be that long. We're all thinking like 2 or 3 days, maybe a couple of weeks, to get the actual system all clean again. But if it's a couple of months, it's not sustainable, that's for sure.
Locals are fed up and worried about how long it's going to take to get things sorted.
It just goes to show that the infrastructure in this town, we're not set up for this number of people, and they've known that for years. And, they just want more and more people to come to this town, but the infrastructure's not there. We want people to come here, but we can't even give them water.
The fact of the matter is most of the infrastructure is built for probably 20, 30 years ago.
Not surprised, but probably a bit shocking. I mean, I would imagine, that we'd be a little bit more sophisticated and be able to sort out a lot quicker.
They should fix it because water is life, it's source of life.
So this resort town, where tourism is its lifeblood, could be facing months of boiling water as it rolls into summer, with big events on the cards.
The risk and of reputation that is high on my mind. But the priority now is public health and the care of our visitors and our residents.
But the Mayor is issuing this plea to tourists with plans to visit his town.
Please come. There's many places in the world that have this sort of regime in place. It's not ideal, but Queenstown's still open and you'll still have an enjoyable time here.
A message he hopes people hear with the school holidays just around the corner.
And the video version of that story will be on our web page. Yet another report into Oranga Tamarikis revealed a litany of problems, including allegations of bullying, harassment, sexual and physical assault. The rapid review of OT's secure youth facilities was ordered in June after claims of inappropriate sexual conduct by workers. 28 complaints have been referred to police, 3 staff have been charged and 22 workers have been removed from their jobs. On top of that, the review found there is a profound misalignment between the high needs of Tamariki and a largely unskilled and unregulated workforce. In June, former Police Commissioner Mike Bush was put in charge of Oranga Tamariki's youth justice facilities and community homes. He admits Oranga Tamariki had poor vetting processes, staff hired their friends and workers with gang connections, even though the agency's top job is to look after the children in its care.
That's non-negotiable. Now, I've got to say that the vast majority of staff who work in Oranga Tamariki, no matter what part, but in the residents and the homes, are passionate, committed, good people doing their very, very best. The failures are on behalf of a very small group of people. But that's something we can't tolerate. And that's what we're here to ensure doesn't occur again. But we also have to address a number of things inside the organisation, and you will see those observations listed inside that report. And that's what our focus will be on.
It's not just the failings of a few bad apples, though, Mike. When you look at it, the report says there is a profound misalignment between largely unskilled, largely unregulated workforce that is having to meet the high needs of children. So, to go forward, where are you going to get the trained professional workforce that you need to do the job?
That's going to be a challenge, but it's an important one. We have brought people into the organisation that aren't necessarily a good fit or don't have the skills and capability or are not developed into those roles. That's a real priority for us to address. But on that point, the people inside Oranga Tamariki are passionate about this place, but we know better than others what our reputation looks like. We've got to rebuild our reputation. We've got to get our money back. It's not just a
reputation, though, is it, Mike? It's not just a reputation. There is fact to back up people's perception of Oranga Tamariki. Profound misalignment. You've got staff in there that are not skilled for the job. What percentage of your workforce do you think is not up to the job?
Well, as I say, the vast majority are up to it. Absolutely, and I commissioned this review, so I stand by all the commentary here. But I can attest to the commitment of the executive and the leadership of Oranga Tamariki. They've accepted our report and they're very focused on fixing it.
Okay, so since June, I think it is, 22 people have been moved on, shuffled off, right?
Yep.
Not suitable for your organisation. Is there going to be more?
Quite possibly, absolutely. Yeah.
Quite possibly or absolutely, Mike?
Pardon?
Quite possibly or absolutely. Are there absolutely going to be more people who are removed from Oranga Tamariki because they are simply not up to the job?
So we've got a number of things going on at the moment, and we do anticipate that as this report lands in the public domain, we will get more complaints. We're absolutely set up to investigate all those, and we encourage people to come forward and tell us. So we ourselves will be identifying people who are not up to the job, and if others identify those people, we're onto it with urgency.
Have you changed your vetting process for workers?
Yes, we have, and that wasn't up to standard. It was being done in silos, so there were gaps. We were missing things. So that's been addressed in the last 2 months.
Is there a pattern in who hired these people? The people that were moved on, were they all hired by the same person, same department?
Not necessarily, but The recruiting process in patches and places was of a concern. It was almost like they were just recruiting their mates, locally people who weren't qualified. We've stopped that. That was an issue.
So were there references checked, Mike? Were there references checked? Were there police checks done on these people?
Yeah, absolutely. There were no, as far as I know, people with criminal convictions. That didn't mean we did the vetting thoroughly. It wasn't thorough enough. So
How
we didn't
so?
know about associations. It wasn't deep enough.
When you were about to say we didn't know about association with who?
With the wrong people, whether it's gang members, whether it's people of the wrong calibre, that sort of stuff we need to know before we bring people into the organisation.
So, Mike, cards on the table. Did Oranga Tamariki hire people who were mates, gang associates, or mates with gangs or criminal elements?
We believe that did occur, and where it's occurred, we have addressed it.
In how many cases did it occur?
I can't give you the numbers. I don't have them in front of me. But your point around vetting is a good one. It's something we, in fact, not just the review team, but the organisation themselves, when they dug into it, identified gaps which they have addressed. One of the things we speak to in the report is parts of Oranga Tamariki operation in silos. Part of the rebuilding of the organisation is to ensure that they're cohesive and that in one place we have line of sight of everything we do inside the organisation.
These are young, vulnerable people, Mike. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, and that just sounds sloppy. So what responsibility does Oranga Tamariki take for endangering these children further?
We own it. We take absolute responsibility. And that's what everyone's committed to fixing. So, I talk to staff who say, we let these young people down. And these are really good people who know that as a system, not through any acts, but systemically, we let young people down. That's got to change. That's what we're committed to.
And that was Mike Bush from Oranga Tamariki, 24 minutes after 5, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai or whakaaro, we'd love your feedback on anything on the program tonight. If you're in the South Island and that bad weather, let us know what it's like in your area. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Also interested in your thoughts on that admission from Oranga Tamariki that they hired people who had, gang affiliations. Again, 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And the email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go to the headlines now. Anea Iwi, mina pita pita kōrero.
Community emergency hubs have been set up in Gore District, where there's a state of emergency after more than 85 millimetres of rainfall today. Gore District Council's Sonia Gherkin told Checkpoint homes are threatened and there's surface flooding, and about 40 volunteers have helped to fill sandbags. Another 10 to 15 millilitres of rain is expected tonight. Queenstown's council has been served with a compliance order for its 2-mile water treatment plant, which doesn't have the necessary barrier to stop the stomach bug parasite Cryptosporidium. The mayor says getting that filter installed could take months, and in the meantime, a boil water notice must stay. The head of an independent review of Oranga Tamariki residences says a significant amount of staff employed by the agency aren't suitable for the job. 22 staff have been removed from residences and 3 people are facing criminal charges since the review began in June. The Ministry for Primary Industries says it's working with a mid-Canterbury farmer whose cattle tested positive for M. bovis. The country had been down to no known cases of the disease, and the source of this outbreak isn't yet known. And the Whakaari White Island Health and Safety Trial concluded today at the Auckland District Court, with Judge Evangelist Thomas expected to give his verdict late next month. WorkSafe alleges the island's owners, Andrew, Peter and James Buttle, put profits ahead of safety through their company, Whakaari Management Limited. The 2019 eruption killed 22 people. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in the South Island, State Highway 6 will remain closed overnight between Haast and Makaurau court order because of a slip while ongoing assessment and works take place. The next update on that isn't expected until midday tomorrow. Please avoid the area if you can. State Highway 96 at Te Tipua in Southland, due to flooding, that's closed at the Te Tipua Stream Bridge. And in Auckland on the Southern Motorway, a breakdown on State Highway 1 that had been blocking the left northbound lane before Green Lane has now been cleared away of all lanes. Our next traffic news and headlines are at about 20 to 6.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Disgraced New Zealand long-distance runner Zane Robertson has been arrested in Kenya. According to local media, Robertson was found in possession of an unlicensed firearm at his home on the outskirts of Etienne. Police found an AK-47 rifle and ammunition when they forced entry into the home of the Oceania and New Zealand long-distance record holder and Commonwealth Games bronze medalist. We are joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. OK, so what do we know about this incident?
So this arrest was for an unlicensed firearm, but Kenyan media are actually reporting that police were at Robertson's large rural property to investigate a sexual assault complaint. A woman had laid a complaint with police following a house party earlier this week, and so when police showed up to question Robertson about this, he refused to let police into his house, but once they forced entry, that is where they found the rifle and the 23 rounds of ammunition. And that was when they decided to take him into custody, so he's been held at a local police station in Etienne. And RNZ did ask MFAT if the New Zealand government was providing any assistance. The ministry said they were aware of the reports of the arrest, but due to privacy, they couldn't let us in on any information on individual New Zealanders. Now, Robertson has actually been living in Kenya for a very long time. He left New Zealand with his twin brother when they were teenagers, so he's 33 years old now, and that was to pursue their part in running that's a part of the world where a lot of people go to do that. But he's actually lost ties with Athletics New Zealand quite recently as well. Due to earlier this year, he was found by the Sports Tribunal to have been doping. So he's been banned for 8 years, 4 years for finding EPO in his system and 4 years for tampering with evidence given to the Sports Tribunal.
Yeah, pretty serious stuff, Felicity. OK, let's move on to Australian Sports Cars has confirmed when the motor racing series will return to New Zealand and...
That's right. So a 3-year deal came out today. So that will see the racing move south a little bit further to Taupo International Motorsport Park. So this is on the back of... It was in New Zealand since 2001, but actually missed out this season due to the closure of Pukekohe Park with motor racing there. In order to get it back in New Zealand, it's been a collaboration between the government's major event fund giving it $5 million and support from the Taupo District Council. So the first of these events will be mid-April next year, and then for the next 2 years after that, racing fans will be able to go out there and see the supercars back in New Zealand.
Thank you, Felicity. That's our sports reporter, Felicity Reid. A relative of the man badly beaten by a dozen gang members over the weekend has hit out at the politicians who repeated the same old slogans at a community meeting last night. Videos on social media show the patched rebel gang members circling a man as he lies on the ground, beating him and kicking him hard in the face. Following a community outcry, a meeting was held in Coromandel town last night, attended by local and national political leaders. But as Tom Taylor reports, the meeting did little to quell locals' fears of further violence.
So look, can I ask you now just to... What if they do come back? What about our kids that got beaten up? Well, they're ready for war, bro. Yeah, they're ready for war. You're not even talking about our kids.
At last night's town hall meeting, the National Party's police spokesperson, Mark Mitchell, is interrupted as he tries to reassure people about the gang presence on the peninsula.
We're not blaming it on our police in our town. Yeah, but you're going on us.
The man, I find out afterwards, is a relative of the person who was brutally beaten on the side of the road in broad daylight.
This fella's in there acting like he just wants a bloody portfolio for the government or something, but you've got nothing to do about that, mate. The young fellas got beaten up on the weekend. Bro, they can't even walk down the road, bro, because these fellas trying to take out their town. Bro, I'm just saying, man, that what I told them in there, bro, they got a family, bro. And if they gang come back, they're going to have a full-on war in this town, bro, and these fellas won't be able to do nothing about it.
He was left with the sense there's no plan to tackle the Coromandel's gang problems going forward.
This fella's trying to say they're not going to come back, bro. Another one will come back. And then another gang, then another gang. It's just how it is. Gangs are everywhere in New Zealand, bro, and they're not going to stop it. He's telling us he's going to take patches off their backs, bro. Patch ain't coming off their back. They don't even care about the government.
Mary Farmer witnessed the brutal beating as she drove back from a dog walk. She rang police, and when the attackers left, she and another woman hurried to help him.
He was obviously concussed. He just was in cuckoo land.
As the gang members rode off on motorbikes and other vehicles, they threatened the man as he lay there dazed.
Just giving the gun sign, like, you know, got you and we see you, like eyes, fingers to the eyes and to you and a gun.
The man was one of 3 people police say were taken to Thames Hospital with various injuries. But when I contacted the hospital, they said none of the 3 were admitted. Police say they know of about 12 gang members travelling across the Coromandel Peninsula over the weekend. And it was evident at last night's meeting, people are seriously concerned.
What protection will we get if 200 of these motorbikes arrive next weekend? They said they're coming back.
Thames Coromandel Mayor Len Salt suggests police cameras could be used to identify gang activity, but he wouldn't endorse introducing roadblocks in and out of town, which didn't go down well with some in the crowd.
We're not a police state. You know, we're not a police state. If we cross a line and say we start putting up roadblocks on the weekends, we just need to be asking ourselves a really hard question about, is that the kind of town and community that we want to live in? So that is all our...
Yesterday, a chapter president of the rebels called local radio station CFM to apologise for the attack.
First and foremost, I would like to formally apologise personally on behalf of the Rebels Northwest chapter.
That apology, which was raised at the meeting, not good enough for this man who stormed out early.
You're saying an apology from the President for kicking someone on the head from one of his patched members is acceptable? No.
Locals say the rebels gang isn't based here in town, but is thought to have a pad out at Kennedy Bay. I'm driving over the hill and across the peninsula to Kennedy Bay, a small settlement about half an hour from the Coromandel township. The road here is fairly treacherous with lots of twists and turns, and it's mostly unsealed. I've just had to stop for some roadworks and got talking to a road worker. He told me that at the end of this road there's a house locals know of that rebels use for their gang activity. Waikato East Area Commander Inspector Michael Henwood says police are investigating the weekend's altercation and considering individual charges. He's confident the group involved is no longer in the area. Police have increased their patrols around the township and have a rolling roster to provide 24/7 coverage across the peninsula. But Inspector Henwood says police can't be everywhere at once and rely on the public to report offending.
And it's 26 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa I nai ko Nona Peltier, who joins me in the studio. OK, let's start with Fonterra and its big numbers. Net profit is up.
That's right. It was, I think, $1.6 billion. This is a lot. Now, that's roundabout 3 times what it was the year before. And part of that reflects the gain that they had from the sale of the Saproli business in Chile. That was late last year. They sold that for $1 billion. So that's what primarily boosted this result, which means it's really just a one-time big result like this. It's not going to stay there. I spoke with the chief executive, Miles Hurrell. They're forecasting for this financial year between 45 and 60 cents a share, and that compares with the result we've just been through at 95 cents a share. So that's quite a step down. He says also the farm gate milk price, which is what really drives farmers' income, is also going to be well down on last year. And this is what he had to say.
Last year, $8.22 milk price paid out. But we have seen some softer demand out of places like China in particular in the last few months, which has meant we've had to revise that milk price down to $6.75. But, we'll be focused on that. We'll try and do everything we can to support our farmers in that regard. But what it does do, of course, is with a lower milk price, it does allow us to support gross margins when it comes to our consumer and our food service business in particular.
So you know what that means? Cheese prices are still going to be pretty strong.
Well, I was going to say, it's a bit of a dichotomy, isn't it? There were people choking on their gold-plated cheese sandwiches listening to $1.6 billion worth of profit, wondering what's going on at the chiller at the supermarket.
Well, part of that money is going to go back into the economy. They're going to be paying a full-year dividend of 50 cents a share, and then a return of capital, also 50 cents. So that's $1 a share that goes back into as part of a dividend and also a return of capital. So the money will flow back into the farming community, which obviously are going to need it because the farm gate milk price is certainly going to be below what they need to break even there.
Okay, price of fish, or not quite the price of fish. Fish farmer King Salmon says new farming practices have improved its bottom line.
Well, I'll say, yeah. It went from, let's see, a $24.5 million loss last year to a $10.6 million profit this year. And that's changing their farming practices and having the ability to, maximize what they have. They've been really struggling with these warm waters. That's not helping their fish farming. So they're now looking to move into what they call a deep, I think it's called deep blue. But anyway, they've been working on getting the farming into deeper, colder waters in the Cook Strait. We'll see how that goes for them. They've been working on that for some time. And I guess they've got they've made some progress there. In any case, big result for NZ King Salmon. Their share price, believe it or not, rose 16% today, and Fonterra's rose 5% as a result of these two really strong results on both sides. Let's see. Now, the top 50 index, it still fell 6 points despite this gain, but that's to 11,319. That's in line with what we've been seeing in Asia. Things are pretty rough because the U.S. Federal Reserve came out and indicated that interest rates are probably going to stay higher for longer. So the our dollar, at 59 U.S. cents. And believe it or not, that's an improvement because it was helped along by those GDP numbers we had today, which were stronger than expected. So 92.2 Australian and 47.9 British pence. And I'll have some more news for you tomorrow.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier there with business news. Now, returning to our earlier story, Gore is under a state of emergency after significant surface flooding inundated the town. Our reporter Tess Brunton is in Gore and she joins us now. Kia ora, Tess. What is it looking like there?
Kia ora. I'm on Ardwick Street, which is one of the streets that is closed. There are houses that have had sandbags and there are fire services and other emergency crews that have been pumping out water. Actually, they've done a good job because when I was here about an hour or two ago, the water did seem to be coming even closer into the properties. But unfortunately, some other properties haven't been quite so lucky and there has been flooding that has been going into them. There's been full front yards that have been flooded, and on some of the roads like State Highway 1 driving northwards, I saw plumes of water coming up as people were driving through the floodwaters. So it's a very wet day here in Gore.
And so what else have you seen in your travels this afternoon?
So I've gone and inspected the Matoda River, which is just near the township, or goes through the township, and it's going fast, it's murky, it's bringing branches that are flowing swiftly through. I also been going through some of the community, and so I spoke to a resident, a renter, Justin White, who spoke to me in front of his drenched front lawn. He had about 30 centimetres of water, so it was going up, above his ankle, into his calf height. And he was saying that he arrived home from Bluff to find this and to find sewage floating in there. So it's been a pretty unpleasant surprise for a few people. Other residents are really worried. One was saying she's got water that's coming up to her back door, and at the moment, if the rain sort of stays, it's fairly steady. It's definitely got a lot slower. The Gore District Council said it was sort of peak rates of 12 millimetres an hour, and that's roughly halved at the moment. And the problem is that there's still a lot of water to come down from the headwaters, so that's going to be coming through, over the next sort of day or so. And there's a lot of concerns from that particular resident about what's going to happen once all that water starts to come through, especially if the rain doesn't ease. And Nee was talking about that Gore has recorded more than a month's worth of rain in less than 12 hours, so 66 millimetres of rain. Gore District Council is talking about roughly sort of 85 millimetres of rain since early this morning, and I was here last night and overnight, and I can say it was just pounding on the roof, absolutely teeming when I woke up. So certainly a lot of residents are hoping to hear no more rain on their rooftops.
Are people sandbagging, Tess?
Yes. Oh, there's been a huge demand for sandbagging. So the Gore District Council has a site on Miro Street and says that when they put out a request, they had about 40 people come through and ask for them to try and, to get sandbags in. They did about 50 tonnes of sand into sandbags, also using 2 concrete trucks. So there is a huge demand, and particularly if this rain continues, I suspect that that's not going to ease up either.
Thanks for the update, Tess. That is Tess Brunton in a sodden Gore there. It is 19 minutes away from 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaro, do keep your feedback coming. 2101 on text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie is here with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
The head of an independent review of Oranga Tamariki residences is expecting more allegations of staff misconduct. Former Police Commissioner Mike Bush says in some cases vetting procedures failed to reveal staff had gang associations. 22 staff have been removed and 3 people are facing criminal charges since the review began in June. Labour Party leader Chris Hipkins says today's better-than-expected economic figures are due to his government's management. Stats NZ reports that GDP rose 0.9% in the 3 months to June. It says the economy never actually went into recession earlier this year. WorkSafe is looking to cut between 100 and 120 jobs in a restructure, but promises frontline inspector numbers will rise. The lead public sector union, the PSA, says this will result in a significant loss of technical expertise at a time when work fatality rates are too high. Meanwhile, WorkSafe Chief Executive Phil Parkes is stepping down. The Tertiary Education Union says Victoria University has ditched some of its more reckless job and course cuts, but more could have been saved. The university is axing 230 jobs and cutting 6 language and geoscience courses to save $22 million. The union's branch president, Dougal McNeil, says it's devastating. Meanwhile, Massey University says it's $33 million in the red for the 7 months to the end of July. It lost $8 million last year. The Tertiary Education Union says about 250 jobs are at risk as the university looks to save money. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic. State Highway 6 will stay closed tonight with an update on reopening tomorrow at about midday. That closure is between Haast and Makaroa because of a slip. And in Southland, because of flooding, State Highway 96 is closed at the Titipua Stream Bridge. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Thank you, Evie. Dozens of firefighters are now fighting 2 fires in the Mackenzie district. A fire near Lake Pukake has now burned through 165 hectares, while another large fire has been reported at Mount Gerald Station at nearby Lake Tekapo. Our reporter Timothy Brown and camera operator Nathan McKinnon are at Lake Pukake.
Firefighters are cautiously optimistic about the fire which broke out at Pukaki Downs yesterday afternoon. Incident Controller Assistant Commander Stephen Butler says the fire is no longer spreading.
So the fire is what we call contained within our fire breaks during the current weather pattern. So if the weather changes again, we're obviously putting things in place because we know that weather, we're expecting it. So we're bolstering natural fire breaks and bolstering fire breaks that we've made.
A southerly change is expected to bring rain and even potentially snow overnight, but the wild and unpredictable weather is making it a difficult fire to fight.
That's been an unprecedented fire because of the fire behaviour. I was talking to a couple of colleagues that have been to a lot of rural fires and they can't believe the actual fire behaviour. The winds are swirling all around, so not predictable whatsoever. We've had 2 wind changes. We had a wind change last night that actually come in our favour. It took the flames and the direction of travel of the fire away from the homes.
So far, it's burnt through 165 hectares with a fire perimeter of some 17 kilometres. About 80 firefighters are battling the blaze using 16 tankers and 4-wheel drive appliances, 8 helicopters, and almost 20 other people are also involved. Local pilot Chris Rudge says the fire is eerily similar to the one which burnt through the area in 2020.
Totally deja vu, and their last one was put out by wind and snow, and that's what they're predicting later tonight.
He says the fire is basically burning in the same footprint as the one 3 years earlier.
It's pretty significant because what it's doing at the moment is actually creating its own weather pattern. So we've got what's called a pyroqueue above us, which is a big cumulus cloud created by a fire. And then downwind we've got wave as well, which is another cloud created solely by the fire. So it's very, very big.
Mackenzie District Mayor Anne Munro says it's concerning to see such a powerful fire burning so early in the year with a summer of El Nino ahead.
Well, it potentially is going to be a long summer ahead. These winds have been really unforgiving. The weather has been very dry, and so yes, it is a concern. But like all challenges, you take them as they show themselves.
Stephen Butler says little is known about what caused the blaze.
We don't know anything about the cause of it at the moment. We've spoken to the person that first noticed it and rung 111, had a chat to them, so we've got a pretty good idea of where it possibly started, but it's not safe enough to send our fire investigators in there as yet. So we'll wait for a couple of days and go in there and have a look.
Meanwhile, another fire has been reported nearby, above Lake Takapo.
We were alerted to that about 1 o'clock today. There's a fire at Mount Gerald Station and Lilybank Road at the top of Lake Tekapo. We've got crews up there and they've got eyes on the ground. It's quite a big fire, but it's not threatening any property.
Stephen Butler says they're currently putting contingencies in place for that fire and planning for tonight's efforts at Pukaki Downs. He says there are a busy few days ahead.
And you can see the video version of that story filmed by Nathan McKinnon on our web page. The country is officially out of recession by the numbers, at least. The latest growth figures out today show a stronger than expected bounce back, pulling the country out of recession and maybe eliminating it altogether. The Labour Party is heralding the update as proof the economy has turned the corner and an endorsement of its economic management. But National says that is an insult to every New Zealander struggling with the cost of living. Our Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch reports.
Right now, New Zealand is in recession.
It's been a cost of living campaign cudgel, the National Party hammering Labour on the daily with recession rhetoric.
We're the only country in the Asia-Pacific region in a recession. The only one.
But new figures out today say that is no longer the case, and indeed may never have been. New Zealand's growth numbers have been revised and updated. Stats NZ now says the so-called technical recession may have actually been technically avoided.
Now is not the time to change course. We need to see this through.
GDP has bounced up 0.9% in the 3 months to June, beating all economists' predictions. That's better than the latest figures out of Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom and the United States.
These results show that our management of the economy is helping New Zealand turn the corner.
The stats for the earlier quarter have also been revised from a 0.1% fall to 0% flat, the tiniest adjustment, but in the right direction. That number may yet be tweaked again, but could mean that R word is scrubbed from New Zealand's record. For Labour's Grant Robertson, it's vindication.
Well, I certainly think it's a victory for the New Zealand economy and for the people who work hard every single day to make sure that we deliver good quality jobs. I believe that we have managed the economy well and the results are here.
To see a finance minister so out of touch today that he claimed victory tells me he needs to get out more.
National's Nicola Willis is not deterred by today's update, calling Labour's response tone-deaf and an insult to all New Zealanders. Forget the numbers, she says. It's about the vibe.
It feels like a recession, and we can have a big debate about the technical numbers, but that is the cold, hard reality.
Bottom line, the outlook for New Zealand on GDP and economic growth is very slow and low and anaemic, and that's why we need to grow the economy.
Christopher Luxon has been running the New Zealand economy down for too long. He needs to take a look at the actual facts and realise that in a very tough period of time, we've got the balance right.
No one should be cracking open the bubbles just yet, though, with the near future still very uncertain. Despite the positive figures today, many economists are picking trouble ahead, with talk again of a recession this year or early next. Here's Darren Gibbs, a senior economist at Westpac.
Momentum is
coming out of the economy, but it's just not coming out as quickly as the Reserve Bank in particular had expected.
ACT's leader David Seymour says it is far too soon for Labor to be celebrating what is just a minor uptick driven by immigration.
Next thing, Chris Hipkins will be taking credit for the sun coming up tomorrow.
The ACT Party today released its updated fiscal plan, taking into account the latest Treasury estimates released last week. It's meant a fairly significant rejig, with the party dialling back and delaying its proposed tax cuts. Instead of a 2-tier system, it now says it would move to 3, down from the current 5. It would also accelerate an increase to the pension age, gradually lifting it to 67 by 2032.
We've sat down with these numbers, and I can tell you it is tough to balance a budget with the circumstances that Grant Robertson is leaving this country in.
Two very different assessments on Labour's economic management, with voters to make their call in just over 20 days. The National Party will release its alternative budget next week.
It is 8 minutes away from 6. Kia amo turumai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and here is the interview we have all been waiting for. Hazel and Spruce are the poster dogs for one man's campaign to get canines on Christchurch buses. The Jack Russells were by fur dad JJ Smith's side when he made submissions this week to Environment Canterbury, asking it to reconsider its policy and allow dogs on public buses. Auckland and Wellington already have some pet-friendly public transport. JJ, Hazel and Spruce join us now. Hi, everybody.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Why do you need to be able to take your pets on the bus, please?
Well, okay, I live in Diamond Harbour, which is in the Banks Peninsula, and there's no public transport via buses into Christchurch. What I can do is I can take them on the Diamond Harbour ferry, get to Littleton, but then I can't go any further on the bus. And as you know, we're fairly isolated, so you need to go into Christchurch to do your shopping and bits and pieces. And I don't like leaving the dogs for long periods of time at home by themselves. So I'm stuck with having to use the car to take them into town, whereas it makes a lot more sense. Get on the ferry, get on the bus, get into town, do what I require, and then head back with my two guys.
So, JJ, for people who are listening, not watching, who have you got there with you, please? Which one's which? And tell us a little bit about them.
This is Hazel. She's 6. And this is Spruce. He's 5. They're from the same family, from a letter out at down at Timaru, a few generations apart, of course. But they have the same, about 5 times great aunt.
So tell me, how do you reckon they'd go on the bus?
Oh, they'd be brilliant. You know, they're very friendly. They've been going on the ferry virtually every week for the past 6 years, 5-6 years, and people love them. You know, they always ask permission if they can approach them. They're little kids, their first exposure to dogs, and they're very friendly with humans. And yeah, they get on very well. They're well behaved. I've had no issues with them whatsoever.
And I know you did quite a detailed presentation, right? You did a bit of research. Realistically, how often do you reckon people would need to drive their dogs around? Because you're also taking this from an environmental point of view, aren't you, JJ? Get people out of their cars, lower emissions. So do people really drive around much with their cars and dogs?
Well, the case study that I had from Sydney, which was the most detailed, which was about 8 years ago, but on average, people were taking their dogs 3.8 times a week with car rides with their dogs. So it's not huge amounts, but it's also the other considerations. People that don't have cars, the elderly and so forth, and to go into the vets especially. You know, there's limited. We're lucky here at Diamond Harbour we've got a vet, but other parts don't. And yeah, it's really up to the people that have their dogs, how often they take them. But for example, there's no dog parks here.
The thing is, you know, some people don't like dogs. They think they're smelly and they do poops and wheeze unexpectedly. And, you know, some people are just simply scared of them.
Yeah, so do babies, but we don't ban them. Yeah, people have got experiences which aren't so great for them with dogs. And so more social exposure where they're in a safe environment. I'm suggesting that they be on, all the dogs will be on lead and a muzzle, so there's no sort of threat of barking or biting. And but we advertise. We only do it in off-peak times, So it's not crowded buses. The bus is too crowded. The driver can say, sorry, can you wait for the next bus? We'd have no problem with that. Dog owners are the friendliest people around, especially responsible dog owners, which are the ones we're targeting.
How long have you been campaigning for this?
About 4 years.
And what do you reckon your chances are?
I'm very, very hopeful and very positive. I got some good feedback from some of the councillors. I think it resonated with them that, look, Christchurch is the only major city in New Zealand that doesn't allow pets on buses. Yet, Christchurch is becoming more and more pet friendly. You know, there's a lot of restaurants, cafes, the ferry, for example, that allow them. So it's just that next step.
So what happens next? You've made your submission, you've put your case. What now?
Now I wait on the ECAN councillors to get back to me and say, right, this is what we've decided. And hopefully they'll say, right, we're going to progress forward. They've already said that they're going to start talking to the other interested parties, you know, the drivers, obviously, and the management and side of things, and see how they go.
I have to say, those pups have been really patient while you've been talking to me. Hazel, Spruce, how you doing?
We're doing great.
They're absolutely gorgeous. And thank you for joining us. I don't know, I'm picking they go pretty well on the bus because they're sitting there quietly for quite a few minutes while we've chatted. Really appreciate your time, JJ. Fantastic to meet Hazel and Spruce. All the best, and we'll catch up with what happens next.
Thank you very much.
Soaring temperatures already, 5 authorities on Australia's east coast are on high alert as the country faces a challenging bushfire season. In Queensland, the fire danger is high today and temperatures are well above average. But there are concerns there won't be enough volunteers available to fight the blazes that lie ahead. The ABC's Elizabeth Cramsey reports.
Like many states, Queensland relies on volunteer firefighters to cover vast areas, and there's concern about how they'll manage what could be an intense fire season.
We are down at one of our lowest numbers ever of Rural Fire Brigade volunteers. Volunteer participation is at a very, very low level.
Justin Chavot is the General Manager of the Rural Fire Brigade Association of Queensland, which represents volunteers. There are 1,400 rural fire brigades with 28,000 volunteers, down from 36,000 in 2019. Justin Chavot partly blames some training obstacles for the declining numbers.
Training is only set by a centralised training group who are located with Fire and Rescue down in a Fire and Rescue built facility in Brisbane. And it's everything is going down the road of standardisation, and the standardisation is to a system that has been designed for career firefighters.
He says most volunteer fireys don't fit into that category.
The vast majority of firefighters in Queensland are not those people. They are not career firefighters. They are not sitting around waiting for something to happen to respond to so they can undertake training. On top of the barriers to joining, because of the paperwork and the slowness of the system, are the things that are causing us to lose volunteers, not by the 100, but by the 1,000.
He suggests authorities listen to the advice of landholders in rural areas.
They've lived there for generations and they know what is going to happen in their area and what's going to happen next, and when they have a fire, how they're going to meet it and how the fire moves through the environment. They are the only people who know that.
All right, some listener feedback on the weather. Rain at Haast, 400 mils in the hills expected.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Tēnā tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. Torrential rain is causing widespread flooding in the lower South Island, along with gales, while further north in Canterbury, dozens of firefighters are fighting wildfires fanned by high winds and dry conditions in the Mackenzie district. And tomorrow, heavy snow is being added to the mix. The Gore District Council says persistent rain is likely to continue into the evening and is urging residents to stay home. A state of emergency has been declared in the Gore District as more than 80 millimetres of rain has fallen in the region. Numerous roads are either closed or significantly affected by surface flooding. The council's Sonia Gherkin told Checkpoint torrential rain has caused significant problems for stormwater and wastewater networks.
We've had a lot of surface flooding, a lot of
of homes have been threatened. So it's not so much about threat to people, but more threat to property.
Sewage is floating in at least one Gore resident's flooded backyard. Justin White says he came home today to find his property underwater.
Well, I found the whole front yard about 30, 40 centimetres underwater. Bits of sewage floating in it, so yeah. We'll see what we're going to do about that.
Gore District Council has set up community emergency hubs at the Croydon Lodge in Gore and the Matauda Community Centre for anyone who feels unsafe. Meanwhile, the Southland Regional Council has issued 7 flood warnings for rivers, and in Invercargill and Bluff, people have been warned to stay off the roads because of significant surface flooding. In Queenstown, there's also surface flooding on State Highway 6. The 165-hectare scrub fire at Pukaki Downs near Twizel continues to burn, though firefighters say it remains contained for now. A second scrub fire has broken out this afternoon on Mount Gerald Station near Lake Tekapo. Fire and Emergency Incident Controller Stephen Butler says crews could be set for a busy summer with the weather.
They're predicting El Nino, so we're shaping up for a big fire season. So with that, we need people to be vigilant, check on their fires that they've lit, control burns, just check on them and make sure that they're actually out. So yeah, it is concerning. It's going to be hot, dry, and unfortunately this probably won't be the last.
Residents who have been evacuated are set to spend another night in Twizel, with the Mackenzie District Council providing support. The head of an independent review of Oranga Tamariki residences says a significant number of staff employed by the agency aren't suitable for the job. 22 staff have been removed from residences, and 3 people are facing criminal charges since the review began in June. Former Police Commissioner Mike Bush says in some cases, gaps in vetting procedures failed to reveal staff members with gang associations.
It was almost like they were just recruiting their mates, locally people who weren't qualified. We've stopped that. That was an issue. It wasn't thorough enough. Whether it's gang members, whether it's people of the wrong calibre, that sort of stuff we need to know before we bring people into the organisation.
Mike Bush says he expects publicity surrounding the review will bring more allegations of misconduct to the surface. Labour Party leader Chris Hipkins is hoping more voters will back his party following the release of better-than-expected economic figures. Stats NZ today reported that GDP rose 0.9% in the 3 months to June and said the economy never actually went into recession earlier this year. Campaigning in Hawke's Bay, Chris Hipkins says the improvements are due to his government's good economic management. Mr Hipkins says Labour's plan will reduce costs for New Zealanders without contributing to inflation. He says a national-led government would put the economy at risk with policies that would increase inflation. National's finance spokesperson Nicola Willis strongly rejects Labour's argument, saying Labour has recklessly mismanaged the economy. ACT has slimmed down its tax plans but says its dreams of shrinking tax brackets further were squashed by poor government spending. Its plan would nearly halve the tax rate for people earning between $50,000 and $70,000 a year. It would increase the tax rate for earnings less than $14,000 and eventually lower the rate for people earning over $180,000. Leader David Seymour says the plan is as good as they can get.
For each $1,000 possible income, we've shown that at the minimum, people are $238 better off per year. So everyone is better off. It's not much. We're not selling it as being a big tax cut because we don't think that that's responsible or realistic. We've got to deal to debt and deficiencies in public services.
ACT says it will also give a tax credit to the lowest income earners. WorkSafe has confirmed it's looking to cut between 100 and 120 jobs, but promises frontline inspector numbers will rise. This comes on the same day the agency announced Chief Executive Phil Parkes is stepping down. The lead public sector union, the PSA, says the restructuring proposal will result in a significant loss of technical expertise at a time when work fatality rates are already too high. WorkSafe says it's consulting staff about its proposal, which will still leave it with more staff than before COVID. Board Chair Jennifer Kerr says Mr Parkes has been a strong advocate for safety. She says he believes it's time for new leadership and thinking at the agency. And nearly 70 countries at the United Nations have signed the first ever treaty on protecting the international high seas. They include New Zealand, Australia, the United States, China and all members of the European Union. The High Seas Treaty aims to help place 30% of the seas into protected areas by 2030. That's the news.
This Saturday morning, the much maligned bat, a virus reservoir, could also be good for our health. Emma Teeling is working on mapping all bat genomes. Olive Jones's history of the anarchic Graham Downs community describes what can happen when there are no rules. And David McAllister on making the Eurocentric colonial art of ballet relevant. Corkin Hillahay, join me Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
You're back on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also from Whanganui to Wellington, mainly fine. Cloud increasing in the west tomorrow with patchy drizzle from Horowhenua to Wellington. For the remainder of the North Island, fine, then becoming cloudy tonight with patchy drizzle developing. Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine today. Rain developing tomorrow afternoon with heavy falls. Bulla, showers turning to heavy rain tomorrow afternoon. Westland and Fiordland, heavy rain, easing in Fiordland this evening and Westland late tomorrow. Thunderstorms possible today. For Canterbury, high cloud today with severe northwest gales about the high country. Rain developing in the south tonight, spreading north tomorrow with heavy falls and with snow lowering to 100 metres. For Otago and Southland, thundery rain easing to scattered showers in Southland this afternoon and Otago early tomorrow. Snow above 400 metres in Otago tomorrow. And for Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. The time is 7 minutes past 6. I will have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Thank you, Evie. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Australia's federal government has announced an inquiry into the country's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. It will have a wide scope and will be led by medical experts and economists rather than politicians. It's hoped it will create a blueprint for Australia to handle future pandemics. Here's the ABC's David Sparks.
The COVID-19 pandemic claimed more than 20,000 Australian lives and left many thousands more with lasting health problems. The sweeping lockdowns, border closures and business restrictions also smashed the economy. Now, the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is announcing an inquiry to examine how the crisis was handled and what could be done better next time.
One of the things that I want to do from the lessons as well is to ensure that we're positive. The process of learning from the pandemic is constructive rather than destructive.
The Prime Minister says the probe will examine findings from other inquiries as well as conducting its own investigations.
The terms of reference for the inquiry include key health measures, including COVID-19 vaccinations and treatments, key medical supplies such as personal protective equipment and public health messaging, broader health support for those impacted by COVID-19 and lockdowns, including mental health and suicide prevention supports, and access to screening and other preventative health measures.
The inquiry will also examine financial support for individuals and support for industry and business. It'll be led by 3 experts: epidemiologist Catherine Bennett, economist Angela Jackson and experienced public servant Robin Cruck. Health Minister Mark Butler says they'll have a wide scope.
But also what we could have done better and make sure that when the next pandemic strikes, which it will according to all of the health advice, that we do better in those areas.
The opposition has attacked today's announcement. Peter Dutton told Sydney radio station 2GB that before Anthony Albanese became Prime Minister, he promised a Royal Commission on the pandemic, and an inquiry falls short.
A Royal Commission allows for a comprehensive review. I think Australians expected that, and that's certainly what they were promised by the Prime Minister, and now we're in a position where he stepped back from it.
In January last year, Mr Albanese, who was then opposition leader, said if he won the election, he would launch either a Royal Commission or some other form of inquiry. Whatever the format, health experts hope it will lay out a blueprint for future pandemics. Associate Professor Linda Selvey from the University of Queensland is an expert on infectious diseases and public health.
I definitely think that we should have an inquiry into the handling of the COVID pandemic, because it's really important to learn from such a very large event to ensure we do better next time.
Linda Selvey wants the inquiry to focus on aged care, Australia's preparedness for the pandemic, including protective equipment like masks, and the vaccine rollout.
Yes, two things. One was the delays in Australia obtaining the vaccines, and I understand being a small country, we might be a lower priority for the vaccine producers in terms of sheer volume, but there may have been something that could have been done better to get the access to the vaccines quicker, or sufficient vaccines for the population. And secondly, it was actually the vaccine distribution to states and territories was a bit chaotic at times as well. So I think that's something that should be looked at.
She also wants the inquiry to look at how the pandemic affected different sections of the community.
The socioeconomic gradient in terms of we know that people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds fared worse. They were more likely to get COVID and then die from it. And I think we need to figure out how we can do better in that space. And
were probably more hit by shutdowns as well, weren't they, in a lot of cases?
That's right, yes, they were, and often having to work when all the rest of us were able to stay at home.
Anthony Albanese has asked the inquiry to report back within 12 months.
It is 12 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The family of former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan says they fear for his life in jail as he faces dozens of criminal charges which look likely to end his political career. Pakistan is months away from a national election and Mr Khan's supporters say he's determined to keep fighting despite battling charges ranging from corruption to treason. The ABC's Ava Diaz reports.
Imran Khan pulls back a wall of corrugated iron that surrounds her brother Imran Khan's Lahore mansion.
So this was never like this before, I assume?
As we step onto his sprawling property, it now feels like it's in the middle of a war zone. Sandbags surround the area to stop attacks, and security are camped out on his lawn to guard his wife, who lives inside. His family say they're worried he'll be killed in jail.
If he's in custody, our family feels you do not touch a hair on his head. He's your guest, and you do not even think of hurting him.
Imran Khan was arrested from this house in August. He's now facing more than 180 charges, including releasing state secrets and corruption. His sister, Alima Khan, says he's passing the time in jail by reading.
So he's, I think, on his third round of reading the Quran. And he reads a lot of books.
Mr Khan, also a former cricketing legend, became Prime Minister in 2018. He was ousted last year in a no-confidence motion and has since been charged, leading to protests around the country. He says the cases against him are politically motivated to stop him from running in elections, something the interim Information Minister, Murtaza Solangi, denies.
If the laws of the land allow him to contest elections, he will contest or he will be allowed to contest, but that decision is not made by the caretaker government of Pakistan.
Imran Khan became leader with the support of the country's powerful military. He then fell out with the army and lost the prime ministership. It's a fall from grace for the man who was once Pakistan's golden boy, first on the cricket pitch and then in politics. Now it's unlikely he'll even be able to contest in another election. He doesn't have many options left to get out of jail soon. But his family says he'll keep fighting.
He's not somebody who believes that a minute should be wasted because he's on a mission. This is not about being a prime minister. For him, it's about awakening the people. And if he succeeds in that, that's his mission. That's about it.
Indonesia is suffering under El Niño, drying out the country's rice paddies. This is putting food security in danger in a nation that relies on rice as a staple food. And with climate change, such weather patterns are set to become more frequent. Here's Deutsche Welle's Minka Kerr.
Dry, dead fields, where food for millions of mouths should be growing. Farmers in West Java have barely seen a drop of rain for months. Rice crops are dying, and the ones that survive often have empty husks.
In good conditions, we can get 5 tonnes of yield. But for now, we can only get 3 or 4 tonnes. There's been no rain. If there was rain, the amount of rice would be much higher and we'd naturally have fewer pests.
This year's particularly long and harsh dry season is due to the El Niño weather pattern in the Pacific Ocean. The warming and drying effect of El Niño is a natural phenomenon and occurs every few years. But the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says the effects of extreme El Niño events are likely getting much worse and more frequent with human-induced climate change. This poses a major threat to Indonesia's farmers and the millions of people reliant on the food they produce. Most of Indonesia's 270 million people eat rice as a staple food, but prices have risen sharply since last year.
Our only hope now is imported rice. The government must take immediate action to stop prices rising.
The Indonesian government has promised a multi-million-dollar rice aid package. But scientists warn other major rice-producing countries across Asia are also feeling the pressure from climate change, and this could further strain global supplies.
Australian politicians are meeting US Congress members as they campaign for the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. The United States is trying to extradite the 52-year-old from the United Kingdom to face espionage charges. Here's the ABC's Jade McMillan from Washington.
This is a bipartisan group of Australian politicians and they're hoping to sit down with members of Congress on both sides of US politics as well. Today they met with Republicans. Tomorrow they're hoping to sit down with Democrats. They've also got meetings at the Department of Justice, which is prosecuting Julian Assange. He has been charged with 18 counts, including under the US Espionage Act, relating to the obtaining and publishing of tens of thousands of military and diplomatic documents. He has spent more than 4 years in London's Belmarsh prison. That's after spending 7 years inside Ecuador's embassy in London. He is fighting his extradition to the United States through the UK courts. But Nationals MP and former Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce says it's time that he was released.
We didn't come here to pick a fight. We came here to get a resolution, and working together in a bipartisan way, I believe, takes us one step closer to the outcome we all want, which is an Australian citizen, in this instance known as Julian Assange, brought home to Australia.
Now, there aren't a lot of members of Congress willing to publicly state their support for Julian Assange's release, but Republican Thomas Massey is one of them. He was inside one of those meetings with the Australian delegation, and he had this to say afterwards.
The man spent 10 years in virtual solitary, confinement. I think for printing facts, he's been overly punished. We have something here in the United States called the 8th Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has previously said enough is enough, that in his words, nothing is served from the ongoing incarceration of Julian Assange.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on the UN Security Council to strip Russia of its veto power in his highest-level in-person confrontation with Russia since it invaded his country 19 months ago. Russia has been widely condemned at the United Nations in New York, where world leaders are meeting this week for the General Assembly. The ABC's Elizabeth Cramsey reports.
Last year, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the UN via video link from Kyiv. This year, in his trademark olive green sweatshirt, he was in New York in person. And addressing the United Nations Security Council overnight, he had one clear message.
В руках агрессора ось те,
Veto power in the hands of an aggressor is what's pushed the UN into a deadlock. Regardless of who you are, the current UN system still makes you less influential than the veto power possessed by a few and misused by one, namely Russia.
The Ukrainian president is requesting Russia, one of 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, be stripped of its veto power.
Membership of the UN Security Council should be suspended for a period of time if that state resorts to aggression against another nation in violation of the UN Charter.
Russia's foreign minister is Sergei Lavrov. He and Mr Zelensky did not cross paths. In a carefully orchestrated coincidence, the Russian diplomat did not enter the hall until after the Ukrainian leader had spoken and left. Once at the microphone, he traded accusations with Western allies.
The West, led by the United States, arbitrarily began to decide the destinies of all mankind and increasingly ignored the legacy of the Founding Fathers. Today, the West selectively becomes principled according to its own selfish geopolitical needs.
Ukraine's Security Council allies responded, denouncing Russia's invasion. The US Secretary of State is Antony Blinken.
In this war, there is an aggressor and there is a victim. One side is attacking the core principles of the UN Charter. The other fights to defend them.
Speaking outside the meeting after President Zelensky's address, Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong also condemned Russia.
And I was struck by the Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama's reflection, and he said this: "Who could have imagined that in the 3rd decade of the 21st century, a disastrous war started by a permanent member of this council would put Europe at risk by brutally undermining all the principles that gave birth to the United Nations."
The United Nations Security Council was formed in 1945 at the end of the Second World War in an attempt to prevent future global conflicts. Its permanent members, France, Britain, the United States, China and the then USSR, were all given veto power. Many critics say the council is no longer fit for purpose. Maria Fernanda Espinosa is a former president of the UN General Assembly and was Ecuador's Foreign Affairs and Defence Minister.
The institutional design of the UN was thought in a completely historical, different context. It is not the post-Second World War context. It's not the Cold War era.
And she says, with Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine, she says the time to reform the council is now.
Azerbaijan's military operation in Nagorno-Karabakh has ended now that a ceasefire brokered by Russia comes into effect. The latest clash saw the disrupted region pounded with rockets and heavy artillery. A human rights official says as many as 200 people have been killed and many more injured, but this number hasn't been verified. Here's Deutsche Welle's Kokab Shanrani.
Azerbaijan said it would not stop until ethnic Armenian fighters surrendered. Gunfire and fear took over the streets of Stepanakert, the main city in Nagorno-Karabakh. After a day of bombardment, a ceasefire was announced. Nagorno-Karabakh's defense forces agreed to Azerbaijan's demand to disarm. Azerbaijan's defense ministry has said the ceasefire agreement also requires Armenian armed forces to leave their combat positions and military posts throughout Nagorno-Karabakh. Russia, one of the backers of the agreement, said its peacekeepers evacuated around 2,000 civilians. The past day of fighting left a trail of destruction, where dozens were killed and hundreds of civilians injured.
What can I say? Maybe I was very lucky that I've survived. If you could see what was happening here yesterday. Everything was covered with smoke.
Here in Yerevan, crowds gathered to protest the renewed military operation. The breakaway territory is internationally seen as part of Azerbaijan, but its population is majority ethnic Armenians. It's been a flashpoint between the two countries for decades, where the threat of conflict is never far away.
Shouts of "Long live the King" have echoed out across Paris as King Charles toured the French capital. His state visit had been planned for March but was delayed due to riots over pension reforms. At the end of the first day, King Charles and Queen Camilla attended a glittering banquet at the Palace of Versailles, and they weren't the only celebs. The BBC's Daniela Ralph reports.
The glitz and the glamour of the state banquet at Versailles. The actor Hugh Grant made the guest list, as did Rolling Stone Mick Jagger. Last to arrive, the King and Queen, welcomed by President Macron and his wife Brigitte. Inside Versailles' Hall of Mirrors, speaking mostly in French, the King thanked his hosts and stressed the need to work together to protect the environment.
Ensemble, nous nous efforçons de protéger et de restaurer notre monde naturel.
Earlier, the King and the Queen were given a ceremonial welcome at the Arc de Triomphe, full of pomp and pageantry and reminders of shared sacrifice. The post-Brexit relationship between the UK and France has been bumpy, but there was a show of unity from the King and the President as they shared a sunroof down the Champs-Élysées. State visits are about strengthening future relationships, finding common ground. But on this trip, there is a touch of nostalgia too.
Je me rappelle le plaisir que j'ai eu.
During her reign, the late Queen made 5 state visits to France. Her son will walk in her footsteps this week, revisiting some of the same places. But right from the start, the message of this visit was clear. Even the flypast was a joint enterprise. The French Air Force and the Red Arrows flying together for a trip where shared experiences will be the focus.
And finally tonight, an alligator with no upper jaw has found a home at a Florida reptile park. The park believes the injuries may have been sustained either in a fight or from a boat propeller. CNN's Jenny Moose reports.
Talk about an underbite. Meet the Florida gator everybody's jawing about.
This is the most extreme I've ever seen of this kind of injury, but her eyes are really sweet.
Her snout was sliced off, just short of those sweet eyeballs, probably by the propeller of a boat, says the trapper holding her, who brought her to Gatorland Park. Let the contest begin. Help us name our newest resident. Suggestions range from gummy to jaw, singular, to bottom feeder to Gator McGatorface.
Someone suggested topless.
Topless? Oh, that's a little racy for a family park.
In mid-interview, we got an update on the quarantined alligator.
Breaking news, the new gator held a meatball on her tongue for 5 to 10 minutes, and then she spit it off.
A meatball? Yeah, there you go.
That little pop.
This is a gator named Trapjaw with a similar, though less severe, injury. He's been trained to eat meatballs. No need to chew.
Kind of kick them back like a man in a bar drinking a beer.
They hope their newest resident will do likewise. Savannah Bone doesn't just preach gator conservation. She wears gators on her sleeve. Her favorite name submission is Gumdrop, while we preferred one inspired by Dolly Parton's song. How about Jawline for the new gator?
I'm going to add that to the top 10 list.
The gator kind of reminds you of Mr. Bottomtooth from Family Guy. This amazing creature said, "See you later, alligator," to her entire upper jaw, and yet survived.
Jolene, Jolene. Very interesting. I hope it survives. OK, the Local News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. Tune in tomorrow from 5 a.m. First Up talks alternative budget tweaks with David Seymour, who will be up early after the power brokers debate tonight. So get up early too to catch that one, 5 a.m.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton.
Fire and Emergency will escort people out of the Aoraki Mount Cook area tonight if they want to leave but can't due to the Pukaki fire. They're being taken out in a convoy of vehicles that are meeting at the Twin Streams Bridge at Glentana in half an hour. The number of Queenstown people infected with Cryptosporidium parasites, thought to have originated in the water supply, has risen to 21. A boil water notice is in place. The head of an independent review of Oranga Tamariki residences says the organisation took on staff with gang associations. Mike Bush